Welcome back to the Hoops Temple podcast. Today we're a little thin on the front lines. No Nate, but joining me is Dylan Williamson from New Zealand. Dylan, how you doing?
Not fantastic, man. Speaking of a little thin on the front line, the Clippers just cannot withstand the loss of Mason Plumlee. It's tearing the team apart.
It's destroying the team. We just wrapped up Clippers Grizzlies. Clippers lose by 4 to I think a 1-7 Grizzlies team at the time. 1-8, now 2-8. We're so lucky to have someone so close to the pod or within the pod be experiencing the James Harden experience firsthand. Like that's a once in a lifetime thing that you'll remember forever. It's been I think 5 games now. How's it going?
Oh, absolutely terrible. It's funny that I feel like James Harden and Russell Westbrook are kind of like the opposite experience. Like when they're not on your team. Like I was a big James Harden fan. I'm wearing my James Harden shirt today that I bought several years ago because I just loved watching him shoot step backs and free throws all day when he was with the Rockets. Um, Whereas Russell Westbrook, I absolutely hated to watch and didn't like as a player. And now they're on my team, and I'm like, man, I really love Russ. You know, just the energy, the vibes. He plays hard, and meanwhile, James Harden is like the worst offensive player in the NBA. The numbers before the game I looked at, and there was something like Clippers were like 18 points better when James Harden is off the floor since he's come to the team. And most of it's just offense. Like the offense does not flow when he's in the game. Um, Kawhi is the guy that's most commonly matched with Harden. Ty Lue's gone to sort of a stagger of Kawhi and Harden, and then PG and Russ. And this past game that we just lost to the Grizzlies, it was kind of the PG and Russ against second units that brought the Clippers back in multiple occasions. But yeah, the Kawhi being paired with James, I think makes his life more difficult. You think about the ways that Kawhi excels running pick and roll and running isolation. Is not conducive to the way that James Harden plays. And then the Clippers don't have a great pick and roll partner to run with Harden. There are a lot of times where he's running pick and roll with Zubats, and Zubats is just like a little bit too slow to be in the right position. Like he's getting decent separation, he gets downhill. He's never going to, think about shooting. We just looked it up, and he still hasn't attempted a layup as a Clipper through
Man,
several games now.
5, I
And
think. That's
through
insanity.
5 games and 0 layups, he's shooting half of his shots as mid ranges. Before this game, he was making 60% on long mid ranges, so maybe it's not too terrible, but still. But yeah, like Zubats isn't, I think, a good fit for him. He's a little bit slow, doesn't have great hands, and isn't, that Clint Capella jump up and crush alley oops. And so he's having a hard time fitting in as well.
I gotta note your demeanor is excellent. You have very you've mastered your emotions. Not to trade for your team to trade for Harden and then drop 4 straight, and not to just be just screaming into the mic right now is impressive. When the Kings lost 2 straight to Houston, and I was gonna gonna commit federal crimes. Like I couldn't hang on anymore. Um, I don't
Well,
want to like go ahead.
you should know what it's like, right? Like you come off of being a Kings fan through some dark days, and you sort of get accustomed to it.
That's
Now
true.
you did have the incredible run of being the best regular season team in the Western Conference last season, or was it second best?
Hmm.
That's really got your hopes sky high, so that you can be let down again. But like being a fan of the Clippers is just living with constant disappointment, just having like everything right there, just out of reach, and never being able to quite grab it.
I think the Clippers and the Kings season, like they always end, but they end like just a couple weeks apart. Like it's like a 20-30 win regular season difference, and then or at least it was in, like the Lob City era and like early Paul George and Kawhi era, but it's a difference between that and like one more playoff series. And maybe you know what? It's a lot worse to have expectations. I'll give you that. Like and when the Kings are good, or at least not like the worst team in the league, it's a lot harder to watch their games because I actually like want them to win and like care about it instead of being like this team stinks and they're always gonna suck. Um,
Yeah.
the Mason, go ahead.
there definitely is something to that idea of like the kind of mediocre teams are the most fun to watch. Like I think back to like that was it like 2015 or 2016 Clippers where they probably would have been that, maybe
Like Lou
2018.
Will,
Yeah, like
like
Lou Will,
Gallinari.
Tobias Harris, Gallinari, Montrezl Harrell, and Patrick Beverley.
Yeah.
Like that was the most fun team to watch. And now I'm getting like freaking Paul George, you know, floating while James Harden runs pick and roll to a mid range jump shot.
The drop off for Harden offensively has just been dramatic over the course of his career, where like in 2020, like no one could stay in front of him. Still, he's like 34 points a night, like guarding him. The game was called a little bit differently, and they've worked to change that. But you had to guard him from behind with your hands behind your back, and now he can't get to the basket anymore. Um, Now the Clippers still have a positive point differential, and they've lost a couple close games. Notably, this one we just saw right now, a 7-point loss to the Nets, a 2-point loss to the Jazz. Now, do you think
We won't mention the Mavs game.
okay, we mentioned that game was over about 6 minutes. Do we think there's upside for, this is just the growth period, we gotta see this out, or, like, where are we at in terms of the ceiling on this?
Yeah, I mean, like absolutely. When you're losing close games, there's still some positive that you can, take away because a lot of close games are coming down to execution, and it's hard to execute when you've got these new pieces all together. And so yeah, like that's the hope is that as you figure out the offense, particularly the offense, like the defense is one thing, but when you've got James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, and Paul George, like it should be a pretty freaking good offense. And the Clippers are scoring, I don't know, like 107 points per 100 possessions, which is god awful. So, like, yeah, you'd hope that the offense is going to come around, um, and that they can figure it out. But like, the pieces are a tough fit. And Lawrence Frank does say, the roster isn't set until it's set, as in trades happen, signings happen, and so on. But yeah, there's still hope, but man, could you imagine a worse start to this era?
I compared them to the 2013 Lakers, where, like, they had a ton of talent, and it's still Kobe and Gasol and Dwight and Nash, and, like, how can this go poorly? And it just that team was just old and like just not as into it anymore. And this Clippers team just through the couple games so far feels that way, where there's just the energy isn't there, the hustle isn't there. Like their hustle and energy guy is PJ Tucker, who's going to be like 40. He's currently like he's so like you can't rely on someone that old or and who is so limited offensively. Um, I want to debut my Rajon Rondo theory or the Rondo theory, which is when a team loses. I guess this is for the Sixers bit. I'll save that part for the Sixers bit. We can cut that out. But I feel like I don't know. Should I with James Harden, the assists are there, the ball handling is there, the scoring seems to be there, but I just don't think he bodes with good offenses anymore. The Rondo theory is when a team loses the like high usage assist guy, like the league leader in assists, and then their offense gets better and more fun to watch the next season. Like when Rondo left the Celtics or the
Or any team
Kings
he's ever
or
played on.
every team he's ever played on. Where like right now, like you see the Sixers like just kicking ass and like it's like everyone's getting in, it's super fun and like I just don't think like when you have guys that are super high usage, like if they're good enough, it's worth it, right? Like Luca right now, maybe the usage rate is too high, but that dude's so insanely good that it makes it worth it. And Harden was that kind of player in 2020. He's still kind of playing that play style. And it just hasn't aged well. Just hasn't aged well.
Yeah, and the big thing is that probably like you mentioned, without the burst and the ability to get to the rim, it makes your drive less threatening, which then makes your 3 point less effective. Because then it's harder to create space because no one is, you scared of you driving. Um, and yeah, like that's the big thing is James Harden was once a player where if he's on your team, you're a top five offense. Like he is that good. You give him the ball, you will be an elite offense. And he's just probably not that anymore.
Don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, luckily for the Clippers, they didn't sacrifice the future like to get Harden. It's not this massive Kevin Durant deal or something. Like, it was like
Yeah.
two
It's like
picks and heavy protections, and the Clippers are basically kind of in the same spot they were. They just are trying this Harden experiment. Their next game is against. I had it. I had it. Now I don't. The next game's against a mystery team.
please, for the love of all that is good, say the Washington Wizards.
It's against Denver.
Oh God.
Um, I'm sorry. I knew I was mentioning that for a reason. Yeah. Next game is against Denver. Can a 5-game slide turn to a 6-game slide? Probably. Although Denver's still missing, without Jamal Murray getting banged up. But transitioning a bit onto a team that's doing really well and got rid of James Harden, and now everything is great, is the Sixers. 7 in a row, 7-1. What are you seeing from them, like, that makes them just so special?
Um, the big thing is just that their offense has become even better since losing Harden. Um,
Rondo
obviously,
theory. Rondo theory.
it's literally the Rondo theory. You get rid of the lead offensive creator, and your offense gets better. Now, like part of that is Embiid going from clear number one guy to number one guy, but Harden's got the ball most of the time, back to probably the clear number one guy. And maybe he's just a better offensive creator at this point than James Harden is. I think he probably is. I don't think there's a maybe. And then the other thing is the big step forward from Tyrese Maxey. Like the dude, have you seen his assist to turnover ratio? Just as an aside, it's like 7.5 assists to 1
I
turnover.
have it.
Like the dude just never turns the ball over. In addition to being a efficient
Yeah,
scorer.
really. Seven
Um,
and a half to 1. That's pretty gnarly. Yeah. 26 points on 48, 39, 92 shooting. I mean, crazy free throw shooting. And the thing that impressed me most about Maxi is he scores from everywhere. From everywhere. He gets to the line 5 times per game and shoots 7.5 threes. Like we were talking with Harden, if the driving isn't there, then it makes threes harder. What if you're just great at both? Like, what if you attack the basket with for that, like, insane ferociousness, and then also launch threes? No one can stay in front of you, and that's what Maxey's been up to. I had when I predicted the Sixers to kind of be a middling 45, 44 win team, because I
yeah,
figured
I
the
really didn't
vibes
know
would
what to
be
do with them.
because I figured the vibes would be so bad that it's just like, I pictured an unhappy Embiid, but I think Nick Nurse has really kicked this team into gear. And Maxey has not just like replaced James Harden, but is better than him right now and last season. As he is right now better than Harden was last season.
Yeah, I mean that's probably well, that's true. And the other thing is that Philadelphia in the James Harden era struggled to put together really good defenses. Embiid in the past has been like a elite rim protector, but for whatever reason, once Harden was there, his defense really slid. Like the effort wasn't there, the impact wasn't there. Even
Have you
just like the
tried playing
deterrent.
help defense for James Harden? No wonder
Maybe
it took a
it's
hit.
it's too big of a task for anyone to possibly
Yeah.
put together. But now Philadelphia's figured out their defense as well. Maybe that's Nick Nurse. Maybe that's getting rid of James Harden, not having to cover up for him constantly. But the Sixers are now a team that's pushing top 5 in offense and defense. Which, if you're saying Joel Embiid is this MVP top 3 level of player, 2-way guy, then you would hope that would be the case, that you would be pushing those kind of numbers. And the big thing is that the rim protection is suddenly awesome again. So opponents cannot finish when Embiid is in the paint.
With better perimeter defense, rim protection gets so much easier. We're seeing that now in Minnesota with like Rudy Gobert being awesome again, like just this crazy defender, because instead of trying to cover for like Bojan Bogdanovic or Joe Ingles, it's Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels. And I feel like that's pretty similar. Like Embiid gets to cover for Maxey, who's just he's not a sub defensive ace, but he's better than Harden was, and that's pretty easy. I want to mention we got an email that we had to talk about. This is from PJ. PJ says, I'll read this verbatim. Hello, first time messenger, long time viewer here. I've been absolutely loving Maxey post Harden. He's proving himself as one of the best 3-level scorers and as a more than a competent defender. It is early to say this, but I've been adamantly arguing with my circle that Maxey is the best guard out of Philly since Allen Iverson. The biggest argument that spawned from this is if Maxey is better than Ben Simmons was. I firmly believe Maxey has more positive impact in the game. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the matter. What do you think, Dylan?
That is a
We can
great
start.
question.
We'll start at the core, which is: do you think Tyrese Maxey now is better than Ben Simmons ever was? 3, 2, 1. Yes. All right, moving on.
Yeah.
Yes, you was.
Yeah, I mean, just to dig into it a little bit more, like Ben Simmons at his peak was a really good finisher and transition player, and a strong but overrated defender. And Tyrese Maxey, I think, is just a much higher level offensive creator, and that's the most important thing for a point guard.
That's kind of the only competition. Looking back at the there's no process point guards,
Not like
obviously. No Tony
not like
Roden,
Michael
love.
Carter Williams in a debut.
Maybe, but
First
it's
game of his career, Michael Carter Williams.
Drew Holiday made an
Mm,
all-star team in Philly, and
yeah,
Andre Miller are the two other notable point guards. So when Iverson, then Miller. Is it better point guard or better guard? Best guard out of Philly. That I don't think that changes though.
yeah,
That doesn't really change because Miller and Drew are kind of the best players on those teams.
yeah. It's kind of some dark days for Philly.
Well, they were
I guess
so
they did go through
mediocre
the
that
entire process. Yeah,
they were so average it spawned the process. Like
yeah,
they
yeah.
tried it out like Iggy and Holiday and Elton Brand and managed to get to 40 something wins, and they're like tear it all down. Michael Carter Williams, and I think that's right. I think that's right, and I think in like a couple months it'll be obviously right
Mm,
that Maxey is an all-star when he's an all-star, and he is like it's too bad. Not that it's too bad, but the all NBA voting being positionless like changes how we have to talk about this because we always would say like ooh, fringe all NBA, but it's no longer like fringe top 6 guard. It's just a top 15 player in the league, which I don't think Maxey's gonna touch. That's a really high bar.
mm. Maybe he can get there off the strength of like what is the word? Durability. Like he is a guy that plays games,
Mm,
and yeah, especially when you consider the new minimum game limits that will affect a lot of established guys. If you look at our top 15 from our preseason top 100,
I can
I
do that right
mean,
now.
like how many of those guys are 70 plus game players? It's like Jokic and Tatum.
Yeah, we have Jokic, Giannis will probably get there.
Yeah, Giannis does play as well. That's
Steph 50-50 hasn't. I mean, he hasn't, but I'm sure he'd like to. KD's not getting there in a billion years. KD's averaging like 36 minutes per game, like 36 and a half at 35 years old. Not that it's unprecedented because guys have done it before, but the last guy to do that, 35 years or older, 36 minutes or more, was Michael Jordan in 03. Like that's the
yeah,
competition we're
and
talking about.
and it's a huge offensive load that he's carrying with
Massive.
some absences early season. Although Booker's back now, maybe that'll make it easier on him.
Yeah, can you imagine KD getting to 65 games though? Like, how do you feel about that?
That's probably like the over under.
Yeah,
It's like that's the line.
Embiid. We know how Embiid is with his injuries. Tatum will play. Davis has those injuries. Booker's already missed quite a bit of time. Yeah, I could see it. I mean, LeBron probably won't get there. Dame has been missing games. Obviously, John Morant off the jump can't get there. Yeah, I could see Maxey. Where do we have Maxey heading into this season?
I feel like we were high on him, but probably still too low on him.
We honestly we had him 48th. That's pretty
Yeah,
high. That's pretty good, honestly. Um, like right above Zach Levine. Great call. I don't know who made that
yeah,
happen. That was a
that's
great
that's
call.
good.
And then below Van Fleet, which is Van Fleet has been pretty good in Houston.
Yeah,
Um,
Houston's look good. Um, where would we be looking at him now? Like, who's like the guys that are around top 30? Is that the
Jamal
kind of
Murray, Harden, and Kyrie. We had that that run of players.
Yeah,
Like
that feels about right.
yeah, I think I would take him over like Drew Holiday, Brandon Ingram, Bradley Beal, Karl-Anthony Towns, right?
Yeah.
You take yeah, I would take Maxey.
Yeah.
Maybe I mean, it's possible it's like a really popular top 25 season and a couple injuries break his way and it's all NBA third team, Tyrese Maxey or something. Do you think the Sixers are the favorites come out of the East right now? Is it still Boston?
Oh yeah, it's got to still be Boston.
Yeah.
Like I don't think the Sixers can ever be favorites to come out of the East while until Joel Embiid proves that he can be a really high level playoff player. And we are saying how great Philadelphia's been on both ends of the floor, pushing top five in both. Well, Boston already are top five in both. They're the only team that's top five in offense and defense. So I think they're still the clear favorites. But um, yeah, Philadelphia a lot more likely than what we thought. And probably like the team that we're going to be most wrong on. I remember when we had who did we do the Philadelphia prediction with?
Probably Lisco, right?
Yeah,
Wasn't
yeah,
you here for that? You guys
yeah,
talked me
yeah.
down from that though. I hate you all for that. I had him at 50 wins. I had him at 50
Right.
wins, and you guys were like, "Oh, Harden's missing time."
We,
I'm like,
we
"No, you're right."
I feel terrible for it now because like we had a Sixers fan on, and
Yeah.
then we're like, man, your team's just gonna stink. Like your best player sucks. The vibes are awful. It's gonna be a rough watch. Like
It's been
44 wins
awesome.
or something.
We do have to
Yeah.
mention we do have to mention that Kelly Oubre got hit by a car. It's just one of the most random NBA stories of the past 20
Yeah.
years. I think he's fine. Let me double check. I
I think I
think he
said
was
he had a
bruised
broken rib.
ribs, his rib, hip, and leg injuries. Like I just he's out of the hospital.
Yeah. I think it was
Um,
reevaluated in a week.
yeah, it says he sets
So
him at
so
significant time. That's a pretty big hit. Um,
hmm,
although I feel like they should Oubre is gonna shoot like he's on fire every game. And so when he started off like just 67% shooting, can't miss, and Sixers fans are like, this is awesome. It's like when he cools off, he's still taking those shots. So like
yeah, yeah,
buckle up for that. And but maybe with him missing some time, it's delaying that, and he's gonna come back just as hot. They're
yeah.
saving up on fire Kelly Oubre.
Yeah. So for all of Kelly Oubre's brilliant scoring, the Sixers are 15 points better when he's not on the floor. Um,
That's mean.
which is the
Get well
most Kelly
soon,
Oubre
Kelly
line ever.
Oubre. Get well soon. We can't. We'll say nothing. No ill intention to Kelly Oubre, but I agree with Boston, especially because Boston owns Philly. Like if it's 50-50, you have to give it towards Boston the way they played Philly over the years. I mean, they've owned them for years now. They have that
Mhm.
team's number. In the same way Miami has both of those teams' numbers. The Celtics always get Philadelphia. Until Joel Embiid proves that he can dominate Al Horford, you gotta go with Boston.
Yeah,
I
that
do
might
want
be
to
the
mention. Go
one.
ahead.
Sorry, that might be the one thing that could swing um, an argument towards Philly is like Boston does have to rely on Al Horford, who's what like 60, turning 63 this year.
Does it
Um,
matter? Does it ever matter? Does he play with any? Has he ever played with athleticism that mattered? He's
if
37.
yeah, like
Still plays
37 is
24
an
minutes.
old age to be the primary defensive assignment on a guy who's going to play, 38 minutes a game. I just don't know if he can hold up for those big minutes. And Kristaps Porzingis is not a good post defender. Like he does have a lot of value as a guy who's quite mobile and can defend the rim, but with just that high center of gravity, like Embiid's going to be able to move through him. And so
Mhm.
that would be the one argument that you could make.
It's a good argument because with Al playing just 24 minutes per game, like against Philly last year, he averaged 32 minutes per game. Like, do you even want Al Horford out there that long? Like in the year of 2024, like by the time you get there, I just don't think that'd be at that point kind of detrimental to Boston. Just having Horford having to play that much, it'd be interesting. I don't know who's gonna last or who's gonna break down first, Kristaps or Embiid. That's like someone's breaking like an orbital, or like they're getting banged up. No way. Yeah. I do want to mention out of the East, the Pacers. I believe currently the best offense in the league. I should double check that. I'm like 99% sure. But on the Hoop Simple podcast, we fact check just to be positive. Yeah,
We'll
first
have to get the most up to date stat possible.
first on
Down to the
offense and
second.
25th on defense. Now, let me ask you this, Nate. Does that sound like any other team? Does that sound like another team from last season that everyone shit on all year?
Oh
It's
yeah,
the same place in my Kings were, first and 25th.
that's
Someone
incredible. That this year's Kings.
They're this year's Kings. Their offense is unbelievable. Halliburton is scoring at a high level, dishing at a high level. What are you thinking? I mean, they're currently the 3 seed with their like Bruce Brown addition, and they still have Miles Turner, and Mathurin had a really slow start, but is turning it around. It just seems to be a super deep team that has a lot of fun playing together.
Yeah, like their role players are all sort of like clicking at the right time. Like this is a team that has a really high level creator and Halliburton, but it's not a one man show kind of you know offense. Although he does create, you know, I don't know the stats, but I think he creates like the most points per game on assists plus scoring or near enough. Um, and then yeah, is scoring incredibly efficiently himself. 40% on 7.5 3 pointers per game,
Man, lights
combined
out shooter.
with almost 12 assists. Like that's a really hard player to defend when you can't, um, you can't hedge him hard off of a screen. You can't bring two into the play and leave someone else unguarded because he's going to find that guy every single time, and so he becomes really hard to deal with. And like a James Harden from 5 years ago, or like a Nikola Jokic, where you can't defend him one on one, but you also can't bring help. And it gives a really tough decision for opposing defenses. And then you combine that with the fact that like everyone else that plays any minutes is knocking down shots as well. Like Bruce Brown is over 40% from 3 on 4 attempts. Miles Turner is over 40%. Aaron Neesmith is shooting 50% on 4 attempts. So like everyone's knocking down shots and they're getting good looks and they're knocking them down, which is the two most important parts to scoring the basketball.
We figured it out. We broke the code. Open shots and knock them down. Halliburton 24 points and 23.6 and 11.6 assists. 11.6 assists is kind of insane. I feel like the league. I'm trying to remember in Moneyball, the relief pitcher that throws funny. That's have you seen Moneyball?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, Chad Bradford. This is Chad
Chad
Bradford.
Bradford.
He throws funny because he's a submarine pitcher. And Halliburton has this like funky release, and it kind of scared people.
Yeah.
And he just pulls into threes. Well, he's also really tall, and so that like kind of funky form doesn't really affect him. It's a super quick release, and he just hits it from anywhere. And if you just got rid of that shot form, you wouldn't think twice about his selection. I don't think it's affecting him in the slightest. Like he'll pull up into threes from range. Like if you go under a screen, he's just gonna take it. Just take it straight over you. One of the best players in the league, one of the most dangerous offensive players in the league. We had him 21st on our top 100. That's pretty good. That's
We
pretty
were we
good.
were high on it. We were calling this.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we had a Sabonis ahead of him. That's been bad. That is
Yeah.
just in a
Yeah.
vacuum. That's the wrong look. But
Yeah.
he's right there above him. It's like Siakam and Anthony Edwards and John Moran. I think we're pretty much nailed that. Um, I want to talk about the Timberwolves. The Timberwolves are
Mm,
good.
mm.
Dylan, this might be the best Timberwolves team ever
That's
of all time.
okay.
I'm serious. Like I think that's right, and like I know it's a super small sample size. Um, by SRS are like the greatest team of all time, so I'll ignore that. But really, they're only contending with the 2004 MVP KG year, with which is a 58 win team that lost in the conference finals. if you told me this team was like just as good as that team, I don't think you're that crazy. If let's just we could just say this, it's the second best T Wolves team ever, and that's inarguable. Like no other T Wolves
Top
team has
two
been
and maybe
close.
not two.
Yeah, top two, maybe not two. There's been in the defense is back in the NBA, and it's right here in Minnesota. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean it's crazy that how well this roster has shaken out. Like you really struggle to find a flaw. You know, you've got your defensive anchor in Gobert, who's reestablished himself after we came on in the preseason, and we're like, this dude just hasn't got it anymore. Like he's not the same impact. Dudes aren't scared of him. He's not deterring shots. He's not, dropping opponent shots. Well, they're the number one defense again. Another Rudy Gobert top defense. And like you said earlier when we were talking about the Sixers, having better perimeter defense makes it easier for you to defend the rim as well. And McDaniels, Edwards, like these are guys who are not going to give up a lot of blow-bys and are not going to put a huge amount of pressure on Gobert. Um, you combine that with having size. Like Karl Towns isn't a great defender, but there is value to just being big. And defense is a big part of. Sorry, rebounding is a big part of defense. Um, Not fouling, which you can do by just being bigger than guys and not having to overextend on contests, is a big part of defense. And then you combine that with Anthony Edwards. We, like you just listed out, we had him as a top 25 player coming into the season.
Within the top 20.
Uh,
18 in fact, and that hey,
18.
good on
Wow.
us, right?
Man, we are. As long as we don't talk about Sabonis, we're making ourselves look really smart.
All right, he's been
Uh,
okay. He's been okay.
And then you got like these veteran guys like Mike Conley and Kyle Anderson, where like we talked about Memphis last week, I think, about what are they missing? Well, it's guys like Kyle Anderson who they had, some of these glue guys that can just do a lot of things. And we haven't even mentioned the best player on the Timberwolves, current sixth man of the year favorite, Naz Reid.
Naz Reid, the best player of all time. Um, I love what they're doing with their big rotation because you're right in all that stuff. Like at any given point, Gobert, Towns, or Reed are on the floor, and that just brings a ton of size, and it's really hard to handle if you're the other team. And they built just a beautiful defensive team with insane point of attack defense and like 7'2", 7'9" wingspan Gobert just kind of hanging out under the rim. And before, like in Utah or even last season, when they hadn't really solidified that perimeter defense yet, when Gobert gets brought in a screen, they're trying to switch him onto the ball handler. And instead of, I don't know why I keep picking on Joe Ingles, but it's the only Jazz player I can think of. Well, because Conley was on both, so I can't pick on him.
Yeah.
But Conley's
Jordan
always been pretty
Clarkson.
solid. Jordan Clarkson, like when Jordan Clarkson gets screened and he just gets eaten up. Compare that to Anthony Edwards, where like you can't screen him at times. Like he's so fast, so athletic. He just gets around it, makes up for lost space, and closes out and prevents cuts the amount of times Gobert is put in a really awkward position in half. And so he can just focus on being a crazy rim protector, which he has been.
Yeah. And speaking of Moneyball and its basketball equivalent of Maury Ball,
More
there's
ball.
there's sort of two sides to Maury Ball, which is basically the idea that you take the most efficient shots possible, which are layups and three pointers. Well, there's also like a Maury Ball inverse where the way that you can create a really efficient defense is by not giving up layups and not giving up three pointers. And that's something that the Wolves
Ooh,
have been able to do very well, where they don't allow hardly any shots at the rim and they allow a whole lot of long mid range jump shots.
man. I never even considered the inverse of Maury ball. Wow. Like analytics, but on the defensive end. Defense is back, man. We're here. We're back. We're so fucking back, Don. The league's playing defense again. It's in a lot of fun to see. Current three seeder. They're 6-2. Net rating of +10. That's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Looking like a 60 win team.
And even with that, like Karl Anthony Towns has been I mean, I'll put it lightly. He's been fucking terrible. He's been awful.
Yeah,
Offensively, like can't shoot the ball. Um, doesn't really fit in, but it's still working. And I just wonder what you could get for Towns, or even if you'd want to trade him. Like, what do you think about the Towns situation?
yeah. I mean, there's a little bit of a elephant in the room with the Timberwolves that they are about to get extremely expensive. With Anthony Edwards contract, long term big money. Gobert under contract, long term big money. Carl Towns under contract, long term big money. They are about to become ridiculously expensive. And Minnesota is not, you know, Los Angeles. It's not one of these massive markets with one of these, billionaire owners. They're not a team that's going to be in the second luxury, right? And so the elephant in the room is that one of these guys has to go, either in this season or in the next off season. Like they can't carry these three guys, all three of them on the roster, and so someone has to go. And I do think that right now Carl Towns is probably the most obvious solution in that he has probably the best value. Obviously, you're not trading Edwards, and it's
No.
very difficult to trade Gobert unless there's another Minnesota Timberwolves in the league, which sadly for them there isn't. Um, and
Have they
so it
called the
has to
Knicks yet?
be, yeah. I mean, and so it has to be Towns, who, like you said, not the most inspiring offensive performance. He's not the linchpin of the defense, obviously, but still probably the guy with the best value. And so I do think that that's the guy that has to go. Um, and then the question becomes, what are you trying to get back? Are you trying to get another offensive, wing? Are you going smaller? Are you trading for like a Zach LaVine? Or are you just saying, let's get some, and like an OG Anunoby type, where you're saying we've got offense from Anthony Edwards. Now we just need the pieces to fill in around him.
That's fucking crazy. Yeah, that's like Russell's Celtics defense shit, dude. My goodness, that's scary. I still like. I can't picture the Raptors doing anything that makes them either a contender or really bad. Like they've been determined to be in the middle since like
Yeah,
2020. I still see as the Knicks, like the Knicks are just going to be star hunting. They're still interested in Towns. They've been linked to Towns for what feels like since the Gobert trade didn't like start awesome. Like, hey, like look out for Karl Towns. Like the Knicks might be on that. I just don't know what the Knicks are offering that make that worth it. But maybe just financial flexibility to build a different team and get some assets back is worth it. Half of me wants that. Like get Towns out of here. He thinks he's the guy. He's not the guy. Let's fix this. Kind of like what Philly did, basically. Just power from the people. But half me is saying like, no, Towns is like one of the best offensive bigs in the last 20 years. Dude can shoot like from anywhere, and he's a very talented scorer. That's exactly what the Timberwolves need next to Gobert or next to Edwards is as another big guy that can space the floor and just wait for him to start hitting his shots again. Not really sure how I'm feeling quite yet.
yeah. I mean that is the big thing, and that, like I was just saying, with how well constructed this roster is, part of what you need to make Rudy Gobert work is another front court guy, a guy at the four who is a real threat from deep. And like Towns hasn't been shooting the best this season. He's at about 32.5%, but he's jacking up almost 6 threes a game. So like there is still a floor spacing element that he's providing just with the threat of that shooting. It's not a guy that you can leave. It's not a guy who's going to pass up open shots. And so that does really still provide some value. Um, on the point that you made about Toronto, of their seeming insistence on perpetual mediocrity, um, isn't it time that Masai like did something Masai? Like he's known as like the big swinger, the guy that takes these big swings um, for these star players, the guy that pushes in his chips, the guy that's creative. And he's spent like the last few seasons just like signing middling guys who are 6'9" and you know winning 40 games.
I just
Like
feel
isn't
like
it isn't it time for some sort of swing?
with Masai, he's not gonna make that swing unless he can take like a top 5 player in the league in Kawhi Leonard for nothing. Unless that's the deal, he just seems to be not interested. I gotta give it to him though. I mean, the Scotty Barnes looks fantastic. Dennis Schroeder signing, I laughed at like out loud. He's been pretty good. Like he's been totally fine. The Raptors have been pretty competent. We had our pod, like our initial week one reactions pod, and my disappointing team was the Raptors because our offense was so tough to watch that I just wasn't super interested. But they'll probably be fine. I'm looking at the trade machine right now. I just don't see a way Towns can be flipped for OG because you got to make about 20 million bucks.
Hmm.
Unless like it's this huge deal and Siakam is involved, but like
Yeah, but then that's also defeating the point of trying to save some money if you're um
Siakam isn't expiring and then you just extend him for
okay.
literally the exact same contract. They could like Thad Young, Otto Porter. I mean, I don't see how Gary Trent. No, you could do this. Gary Trent and Otto Porter. Let's see, because Gary Trent's expiring. Success, Karl Anthony Towns for OG Anunoby. OG Anunoby. How do you say that?
OG
Say it.
Anunoby.
Anunoby. I don't know why I got so caught up on that. OG Anunoby. Gary
You're
Trent
having
and
you're having your Bill Simmons moment.
and Otto Porter Jr. I always struggle with that. That's the one name that gets me. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, okay, maybe. I could see that. I mean, Otto Porter is nothing. Trent's pretty good. Give him that, and OG's pretty good. Obviously, he's like incredible. But okay,
Yeah,
that's interesting. I appreciate that trade idea.
yeah, and maybe like does the team need like another just chucker, like a second unit guy who can put up shots, get that real 2018 Clippers Lou Will and Montrezl Harrell bench going
Mm.
with Mars and Gary Trent.
They do have time, obviously, because these contracts aren't going anywhere. Like Karl Anthony Towns is going to be on this roster, whether you like it or not, in 2028 or something. So they are stuck with that. And maybe now it's just not the time. But man, would you not just crush that OG trade if you could get it if you're Minnesota?
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, the difficulty that Minnesota runs into is they need to trade Towns because he's disappointing, but him being disappointing makes him harder to trade.
It's the plight of Karl Anthony Towns. But hey,
And
it
Julius
worked out.
Randle and
Yeah.
so on and so on.
I made a video when Randall started the season putting up just some of the worst shooting numbers I've ever seen in my life. I made a video and someone said in the comments, he's just trying to get traded. Like for what? To who? Like who the fuck would want that? Like I just there is no Randall trade. It doesn't exist.
It's like the reverse Carmelo to the Knicks thing, where like Carmelo forced his way. Like he could have signed with the Knicks in the off season, but instead he played at a really high level, forced the trade, and that resulted in the Knicks trading absolutely all their good players. And so that when he got there was nothing there. And so Randall's learned from that, and he's like, all right, I'm just going to play as terribly as possible, so that when I get traded, they're trading me for like matching salary and a second round pick, and then I'll have a good team around me.
What's matching salary? Like, the only team I can think of that would do that is the Knicks. Like, only the Knicks would be interested, and, like, they already have him. They already signed that guy. Like, you can't just trade around all the dumb franchises. And the Kings aren't Kings, usually could be picked on, but seem to be off limits. I wanna touch on them just a little bit because the last podcast episode was the Kings funeral. Me and Jack just moping like children about the 2 Houston losses, and we couldn't see how things had possibly get better. Next 2 games were much better. Beat Portland, then beat OKC in convincing fashion. I gotta warn you, the Kings have a above average defense right now. And honestly, I thought I was losing my mind watching Kevin Herter and Sabonis play awesome defense. Like they really improved their defense this season, and they couldn't hit a shot. The offense fell just completely. The floor just fell from under them. Their offense wasn't there, but they like are kind of good on defense now. I'm curious to see if like this has been by far the best defensive season from Sabonis. Is this the new chapter? I thought it might be that he adds some range, like he starts hitting jumpers, but it's actually that he has been pretty good on defense. Have you seen any Kings basketball this year?
No, but I mean, like I've seen the odd game. Haven't focused on them a whole lot.
Mhm.
I think we've sort of got that corner covered on this podcast. It's not one that I could devote a lot of time
That's
to.
true.
um, but like, yeah, Sabonis just decided, you know what, we were awesome on offense last year. How about we just don't make any shots, but we'll get stops? And then next year, we'll put both of those previous seasons together and we'll be a good team.
I actually feel like in training camp and out the off season, they focus so heavily on defense that they just started the season really slow offensively. And I'm curious to see where we end up. I'm hoping for a top 5 offense again and, like, it maybe the 20th best defense or something, because that's just the person we're rocking with, but we kinda have, like, some good defensive players. Like, Keon Ellis started both of the last 2 games, and he has been great defensively, and I've been calling for Keon Ellis minutes since last season, and to go from Keon to Davion, that's actually really tough for opposing guards. Like, you're always gonna be kinda hounded by an all defensive caliber guard, at least in college, but a college all defensive caliber guard where they got those awards. But I'm kind of into it. Kind of into it. We're back. It was over, and
Yeah.
now we're back.
And the way that they've done it, if we look at the defensive breakdown, is embracing that inverse Mori ball. This is the team that gives up the fewest shots at the rim and the eighth least amount of threes. Now, opponents do shoot over 70% when they get to the rim. Um, that's the downside of not having a great rim protector. But if you just never allow layups, like this is a team that allows the most mid-range shots in the league. That's a way that you can juice a defense with defensive deficiencies. Um, Combine that with they don't give up any offensive rebounds, one of the best defensive rebounding teams in the league. And they've got some, they've got some ball sharks in Davion and Keon and guys that can, force turnovers. So there are defensive pieces here that you can put together. And if you combine that with Kevin Huerter being able to hit a freaking three-pointer again, then maybe this is the way that this team can get back to that really elite play that we saw last year.
I think it's there. I think it's possible. Like Kessler Edwards has been great on defense. I'm just waiting for Harrison Barnes to stop playing. Like, at some point, it's gotta happen. There's just the stats tell you that guy shouldn't be out there. After every game, like, even the last game against OKC, he played awesome. He's still out there, like, 1 of 8 shooting, and if anyone's having a good scoring night, it's because he's the primary matchup. I mean, he picked up, a majority of Jeremy Grant's 38 points, where Grant struggled to score on basically everyone else. He was, like, 2 of 4 against Davion. Davion's, like, 6 foot flat. That makes sense. But when Edwards is on him or Keegan is on him, he really struggled to score. But he was like 4 of 6 shooting against Harrison Barnes, as he just can't navigate screens anymore and is just really, really struggling. But
Yeah. Is
yeah,
Keegan suddenly a defensive stopper? Like the one game that the last game I remember watching was against the Warriors, and he was the primary assignment on Steph Curry.
hmm
Like, has he just become just the elite on-ball defender?
we're good on defense, dude. We're all of a sudden like this team's pretty good defensively. It's on. It's kind of insane to watch. Last time the Kings were better defensively than they were on offense. Oh, I forget. But it was like it's a sad stat, not a fun stat. It's like 2012, and we were the 22nd defense and 25th offense. That's our version of that. I'm kind of into it. And Fox is coming back this next game. Curious what our rotations will look like. But the Kings really flex their depth in a way against these past 2 games, because they went from getting blown in Houston to starting a guy who had never started before, and then they didn't play McGee and didn't play Vezenkov, and it's just tough to say like you have 14 guys that can play. The only guy that hasn't seen like legitimate rotation minutes is um the Clippers guy they just got. The huge guy. You know what I'm talking about? Petrusev.
Oh,
He's on the
from
roster, and
the
he's the only one that hasn't seen any time yet. Even like Jordan Ford's gotten out there a bit. Who went to high school right by me, but we'll leave the Kings there.
yeah. I will
Now
just
that
say
good,
one thing
good.
before you move on. Is that I do think that we should not be giving up on the Kings. I think that this is a team that is going to regress positively towards a mean that they are underperforming right now. Um, looking at their breakdowns, it's like, what are they doing differently than last year? Well, it's mostly just missing three-pointers. And if those threes can start going down again, you get Fox back, who can generate more free throws, which is the other thing that they're not doing well. More free throws, more three-pointers go down, all of a sudden their offense is really good, and you have the best defensive shot profile in the league.
I mean, think about it. If like the Warriors lost Steph and they went 2-2, would you even think about it? Or if the Nuggets lost Jokic, obviously those guys are better than Fox. But losing your best player really sucks. Like it really sucks, and your team is a lot worse because of it. Fox gets Sabonis good looks, and that turns into open 3-pointers. I think that's really where it was. Is without Fox, who's getting that dribble penetration? Who's getting those kickouts? Like who's getting Sabonis the ball underneath the rim? But now that Nate's not here, do you want to kick around the Lakers a little bit?
He did ask us last week what we were gonna, if we had any ideas on what we were gonna do. And we're like, well, since you're not gonna be on here, we can just do a whole podcast on how shitty the Lakers are. And they are looking pretty shitty.
Just 1 second, I'm kind of lagging out. Okay, am I here? Kind of.
Gotcha.
All right, let's roll with the Lakers. I think they're kind of just in the same spot they were last year, which is interesting because last season, the second half, they were playing like a really high level basketball. Davis is still awesome, 23 points, 12 boards, 3 assists, 3 blocks. LeBron, his numbers are great, 25, 8, and 5, but it doesn't feel like he has that every game, like that crazy LeBron level. It's not going to happen on the second night of back to back. I mean, he's almost 40 years old, and you are seeing that. Pretty good Cam Reddish game. Last game, I think 6 threes. But if he breaks the 6 point per game mark, I'll get excited about it. I can't. I don't want to get too into it yet. But I don't really see the path for this team to be a contender.
Yeah,
Unless it's
and
good.
they've got this sort of real bad dichotomy right now where with LeBron on, they are not super elite. Like they're a plus 5.6, which is like decent. When you've got your best player on the floor, you'd want to be a lot higher than that. But they've got that classic LeBron problem where for some reason, no matter what you do, LeBron's teams can never do anything well when he's not on the floor. Plus 38.3 on off. 38 points better when
Wow.
LeBron is on, and still
Whoa.
not that great when he's on. And it's on both ends. Like they cannot score when he's on, and they also cannot when he's off, and they also cannot get a stop when he's off. And this was supposed to be, Rob Pelinka, Executive of the Year, best deepest roster in the league, and we're just seeing another iteration of that shit shuffle.
Yeah, of the shit shuffle. I've been telling people. The offense is so stagnant with LeBron sits. I just feel bad for LeBron. I remember when I was like 12 and LeBron was winning titles in Miami, and I hated LeBron because I was at 12 for the VA fan. What else are we gonna do, right? And
Yeah,
I remember
I was
like
right there with
looking.
you, brother.
I remember looking up his age and being like, "Man, thank God we don't have to deal with this much longer. Like, he's already 32, and like it's almost over." Because at the time, like guys retired and they're like 36, 37. Like unless you were Kareem or Karl Malone, like that longevity didn't really exist. And he's obviously broken that, but eventually, I mean, we all anticipated the 1A, 1B into Anthony Davis is the one. He's the superstar. He's the everyday player, and LeBron gets to show up when he needs and take his rest days. But LeBron is going to be the best player on this team until he retires. Like that transition's never coming. It's never happening.
Yeah, I mean the other out that they had was, a all-star type season from Austin Reeves, who was on the national team, was one of the most hyped players coming into the season, had a great playoff run, and he is worse than he was last year.
Much worse. Where did we? I think we had him 60. Reeves. 61. Little too high. Little too high. That's all right.
Yeah,
They
like
don't have
he's
that third scorer. How
yeah.
about Reeves and Hachimura for Kyrie? Would you do that? Who says no? Reeves and Hachimura for Kyrie Irving.
Maybe the team that's like top 5 in offense with Kyrie Irving.
Okay. I have a stat for you that I meant to say a while back, but my brother texted me on air, texted me. He said Clippers are minus 67 with James Harden on the court through 4 games. They are plus 24 with him on the bench. Just tossing that out there. We talked to him earlier, and when you mentioned LeBron, in that insane plus minus,
Mm,
it's kind of a similar story, but
yeah, he's the inverse James Harden.
he's the Android. Yeah, I mean, like I want to mention one other thing. Looking at the standings as they are, I think there's really only 2 teams that, like, really I mean, there's a couple teams, but they're kind of already set. Like, there's no, like, "Whoa, that team is 7-2, like, that's crazy." It's kind of all, like, seems about right. The Bucks are 5-4, the Cavs are 4-5. Those teams I thought would be really good, and they're kinda struggling. Do you have any reason to think they're not gonna finish the season as a playoff team?
No, God no.
Yeah, okay, they'll be in the playoffs, or as a top 6 seed. They'll recover, they'll be okay.
Yeah, like greater than 50% chance.
Alright, and then out west, the Lakers and the Suns are the 8 and 9 at 4 and 5. I don't feel super strongly that those teams are locks for a high seed with the way they played and the injuries they've suffered, especially Phoenix. But the only one that's like, yeah, that team will probably figure this out is the Clippers. They're 3 and 5 at the moment. They're the 11th seed, but we're already kind of seeing this shake out, kind of similarly to what we had envisioned. The huge one is Memphis, 1 and 8. Should have mentioned that, but I don't see that changing. We kind of have a. I don't feel like any team is unnaturally hot or like wildly cold. I think Memphis is kind of is who they are without Ja, and the rest
Mm.
kind of is as it is.
Does that mean you're a Houston believer?
Yeah, I think they'll still land around. Like I think that's going to be a 10 seed. Um, yeah, they're set there. They're at the 4 seed at the moment. But they are playing good basketball. I can't deny that. They're playing playoff level basketball with Van Fleet and Brooks, and the offense looks good, and they're giving a shit, and they try hard, and it's so much better from last year. It
Mm.
really is. Do
Yeah.
you have any Rockets notes?
No, it's crazy how night and day it is from last year.
Seriously.
With just like this no hope team that sucks on both ends, and now they're like the try hard team who's top 10 on offense and defense.
I think the try hard is a great point. You bring in a coach who really cares, and Van Fleet and Brooks, if anything, try all the time. Like high
Yeah,
energy, high effort, high standards. It's good stuff in Houston, but I think that's it for us. Do you have any final NBA notes, or are you good to go?
I think we're good.
All right. Dylan, where can the people find you?
Every week on the Hoops Temple podcast, except for next week, by the way.
All right, except for next week. And you can find me on Possible Cherries on TikTok and every week on the Hoops Hill podcast, including next week. I will be there. Thank you for listening.